Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 886 for the 28th of September, 2025. Goodness me. One of the first pets in our family would have been turning 50 today. A lovely Silky Terrier called Silky. Happy birthday, Silky. And if you've had a birthday recently, happy birthday to you. Coming up on this week's show, you can count on Adrienne. Oh, we can always count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill. Adrienne has recently returned back to the lovely city of Calgary, Canada. She was on a trip to Portugal. And while in Portugal, she took some time to investigate the local superstitions. And Adrienne will answer that question. What happens if you try to get rid of black cats? And looks into the miracle at Fatima. After that, it's Woo Watch with Kate Thomas. Now, of course, you remember the last couple of episodes we've had Kate Thomas. Well, the first episode with Kate was a review. Then I interviewed Kate last week, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that Kate has a segment now on the Skeptic Zone. This is the first episode, Woo Watch, and this week she looks at the claimed link between paracetamol, or as it's also known, acetaminophen, can cause autism. Now, joining Kate in her skepticism are medical groups worldwide. It's quite extraordinary, the amount of reputable medical groups from the United States to all sorts of countries, including Australia, have come out against this ridiculous claim. And in fact, our friend and colleague, Professor Dave Farina, who will be appearing at the Australian Skeptics National Convention coming up very shortly, has put out a stinging, scathing video about this, and you can look at that video by following the link on this week's show notes at skepticzone.tv. Anyway, absolutely delighted to have Kate Thomas on the Skeptic Zone with Woo Watch. Following that, it's the Australian Skeptics newsletter, written by news editor D, read by Adrienne Hill. And in the TROVE Archives, we look at the references in various newspapers to the word supernatural and the word skeptic, when the two words are used in conjunction, or at least within the same item. Now, I mentioned briefly the Australian Skeptics National Convention. It's on next weekend in Melbourne. Still time to get your tickets at skepticon.org.au or going to the link in this week's show notes. What a lineup there is, including Alanta Colley, your MC. And what a wonderful MC she is. She did such a great job last year at the Australian Skeptics National Convention here in Sydney. I'm delighted that she is the MC of the Melbourne Convention, Skepticon. I think she's the best choice. Before that, however, if you're in Sydney, come along to Sydney Skeptics in the Pub this Thursday at the Occidental Hotel at Wynyard, where I and the Secretary of Australian Skeptics, Lara Benham, will be talking about life on the ocean, sea myths, and sort of superstitions and things like that. And harking back to mentioning Kate Thomas, Kate appeared just in the last week, I think it was, on Why Smart Women, the Why Smart Women podcast with Annie McCubbin. So check that out. A very long and interesting interview. And finally, just before we get into the episode, a big thank you to friend and supporter of the Skeptic Zone, Dick Smith. A special shout out to you. Well, after all that, that's enough for me. That's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs. Oh, it's going to be a nice warm, looking outside the Skeptic Zone window, sunny day here in Australia, so I'm going to start with a nice cup of tea. Why not? While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. you can count on Adrienne. With Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada, freshly returned from the beautiful and friendly Portugal. Unfortunately, one of its gifts is probably COVID, since one of our traveling friends has tested positive and I have been under the weather since returning. But I can't find a test kit anywhere, so I can only assume that I too have COVID. So I need to get this done before I lose my voice, which usually happens whenever I get sick. Now, we were fortunate enough to spend several days in Lisbon and Porto, toured the Douro Valley, and places along the Atlantic coast. We always opted for walking tours when available, and our guides, without exception, were wonderful. Every place we went to had unique aspects, history, architecture, and culture. And one commonality really stuck out for me. Every guide said that the Portuguese people are very superstitious. Some seemed to take the belief seriously, and some had a twinkle in their eye when telling the tales. And some openly admitted they didn't believe in them, but thought it was important to explain the culture. Now, I have my favorite superstitions that I grew up with that I don't believe in, but still will act out in habit. My favorite one is to knock on wood for luck. And I always knock on my own head. It's a family tradition. And I asked some skeptical friends about their childhood superstitions. Laura Benham, from Australian Skeptics, shared that if you see a lone magpie, it is bad luck. You had to say, "Good morning, Mr. Magpie," to negate it. I love that one. We have lots of magpies here. And Ross Blotcher said that one of his favorites was when someone else said the same thing at the exact same time and then shouted out, "Jinx," first, making the other person remain silent until they had done some act to remove the curse. I think all cultures have their superstitions, but I've never been to a country where the tour guides talk about them so much. So now let's take a look at the Portuguese superstitions that I was told about, along with some fascinating stories as told by our guides. I'm going to start with the University of Coimbra, where we were able to view, but not take pictures of, the oldest library of Portugal. And believe it or not, they have bats that live in the library that come out at night and eat the book lice and other insects. Unfortunately, of course, they leave guano behind, so every night all the desks and beautiful tables in the library are covered with cloth. And the library is filled with ghosts, but not the kind that Kenny Biddle is always looking for. Throughout the library, you can see little pieces of white paper sticking out between the books. Now, those aren't the ghosts. These papers have the names of the people who took the books out, plus the date they must be returned written on them. It's the missing books that are the ghosts. Now, those are the kind of ghosts I like. The university has 30,000 students, and originally it was male only. The first woman allowed to attend was in 1894, and now the student body is 60% women. When students make it to the second year, they are expected to regularly wear a school uniform: black pants, black vest, white shirt and a black tie for men, and a black skirt, vest, white shirt, and black tie for women. And the best part of the uniform? It's a black cape. The students look like they came right out of Hogwarts from Harry Potter. But according to our guide, it's the other way around, and it was J.K. Rowling who was inspired by the Coimbra uniform. There are some interesting rituals associated with the uniform capes. If you look closely, you will see tears in the cloth on each side. It is bad luck if you use scissors to create these tears, so the students use their teeth. One side represents rips made by friends, and the other side represents rips made by family. If you end up in a relationship with someone, they get a special tear. Now, if they break up, the tear must be sewn back up, but not with black thread. It has to be the color of the thread from the department where their ex was enrolled. And I'm guessing some people's capes get to be quite colorful. In Guimarães, our guide pointed out an olive tree in a well-known square. According to her, it was the third such olive tree that had been planted in that place. It had been planted by, I believe, King Alfonso Henriques, Portugal's first monarch. Now, my notes are pretty thorough, but I left out which king, so I'm relying on my memory. And the stories seem to vary online. So I'm just giving you the one the guide gave me. Now, apparently, he planted the tree so that his soldiers could pick a leaf to put in their pocket prior to heading into battle, as a good luck talisman. This became such a popular thing to do that all the leaves were picked by members of the community, and the tree died. Another tree was planted, and the same thing happened. For the third tree, it was prohibited to pick the leaves except for special purposes and occasions. Once the leaves were forbidden, the Portuguese people found other talismans to keep in their pockets for luck, a tradition that is followed regularly today. Now in Porto, on June 23rd each year, there is a beautiful lantern ceremony held after dark. People light a small candle in paper lanterns, and if theirs flies into the sky, the person will have good luck for the year. Our guide said she had had 3 straight years of good luck after this ceremony. Now, this is an event that I would love to witness and photograph. I recommend that you check out some photos online. They're really beautiful. In the wonderful city of Viseu, we were shown the location of the former Jewish quarter of the city, where lovely rounded corners were found at the entrances to the homes. The belief was that rounded corners would only allow good spirits to enter the building. The people had a ritual where they would put their hand on the curve to say a prayer before entering, and this tradition continued until the Spanish Inquisition, and forced conversions happened. Portugal is considered a Catholic country, and according to many of our guides, over 80% identify as Catholic, but only around 18% are actively practicing their faith. And we were told about some interesting traditions that have their foundation in a mix of Catholicism and local lore. For example, in the city of Braga, there are stores that manufacture waxed body parts, such as ears, eyes, hearts, legs, etc. These waxed body parts are left to burn at the shrine of Fatima. Now, some of you may recognize the name Fatima, and I will talk about this city in more detail in a moment. For example, if someone broke their leg, they might make the pilgrimage to the shrine to offer a wax leg, in hopes that their leg heals properly and quickly, and to give thanks for her help. While we did not visit the shrine of Fatima, we did see a wax ear offering at a statue of Saint Autism of Braga, who is also known as Saint Ear, or the patron saint of ear ailments. This offering is a prayer to aid someone's hearing or recovery from an ailment, such as an ear infection. In Amaranta, we found interesting pastries everywhere. They were all shaped like a penis. They were large, small, different colors, often cream-filled. And the story goes back to the 13th century when the town's patron saint, Saint Gonzalo, a priest known for his piety and not his libido, surprisingly, became known for helping women who were infertile to become pregnant. And I know what you're thinking, but apparently he accomplished this just by praying. Inside the beautiful church, on the left of the altar, is his tomb with a statue of Saint Gonzalo lying on top. And on the other side of the altar, to the right, is an upright statue of him that has a rope hanging around his waist. So women who want children will make the pilgrimage to the church tomb and rub their bellies on his left foot. And the foot shows noticeable wear from centuries of this custom. If they pull the rope 3 times on the standing statue, the person can then make a wish. I guess that means that good things happen in 3s. Back to Porto. In the 13th century, the Black Plague was wreaking havoc in the city. The priests in the city decided that the problem arose from the cats that witches were using to cause the plague. Of course, black cats were considered to be the worst offenders, so the population was asked to kill all the cats. And I'm guessing that you know what happened. The population of mice and rats exploded, along with the number of deaths of the people living in Porto. As a result of this error, the people of Porto now have a reverence for cats, and ceramic versions, artwork, designs on fabric, and jewelry are common in stores in the city. Along one of the main tourist streets, a beautiful painted mural of a dark blue cat can be seen. Now, turning to some darker superstitions, we learned that in Lamego there is the only priest, and I'm guessing this is only in Portugal, that is allowed to perform exorcisms. And apparently he has performed many, and we were informed that he decides whether the person has a mental illness or is in need of an exorcism. This is horrifying to me, since how do you determine the difference between possession of a demon and mental illness? Well, you can always read all about it in a 2012 paper, yes, 2012, that psychologist Dr. Jonathan Stea made me aware of, and it's titled Schizophrenia or Possession. In the paper, they state that, quote, delusions of schizophrenia, such as my feelings and movements are controlled by others in a certain way, and they put thoughts in my head that are not mine, may be thoughts that stem from the effects of demons on the brain, end quote. I don't know, it sounds like a mental health issue to me, not a demon. And of course, this paper has been severely criticized by experts. Lastly, I will briefly discuss Fatima, which almost every guide talked about, no matter where the location. I knew of this story from Ben Radford's work, so if you want to learn more about what happened, check out Ben's work and the Wikipedia page. I will provide you with the various versions that were shared with me by our guides. According to the lore, starting on May 13th, 1917, 3 young girls apparently saw visions of, some say, an angel, and others say was the Virgin Mary, a total of 6 times on the 13th of each month, while herding sheep in fields a fair distance away from the small, at that time, town of Fatima. Now, Fatima has since grown into a city due to the many pilgrims who visit, hoping to see this vision and for miracles to happen. They claimed the angel, or Virgin Mary, told them that she would return for the last time on October 13th, 1917. And on that date, a lot of people arrived at the site. According to Radford, it was estimated to be around 70,000 people, and they were hoping to witness the vision. However, no one except the children saw the apparition, but many claimed to see amazing things. For example, the sun bouncing and dancing around in the sky. Now, pilgrims arrive to visit the shrine of Fatima, most arriving on the 12th of each month so they can visit the shrine or participate in celebrations on the 12th and 13th. According to our guide, the record number of people was 270,000 visitors. But according to the shrine website, on May 13th, 2024, 450,000 people participated in celebrations around Fatima, with 250,000 participating in a candlelight procession, which starts on the 12th and ends on the 13th. Now, this would be another spectacular sight to witness. I tried to find out more about this story and purchased an English translation of a book called More Legends from Portugal by Miguel Carvalho Abrantes. He did some interesting research, reading the newspaper reports from 1917 to 1930, and he concluded, quote, although nothing in these documents heavily contradicts the now well-established version or proves they may have been lying, an element which quickly caught my eye is that the 3 children did not share a common experience through all the events. Simply put, and unlike an unbiased reader could imagine, they did not see, hear, or talk to the Virgin Mary. End quote. I asked our last guide, who made it clear to us that he was not superstitious, unlike his mother, since the pilgrims visit Fatima on the 13th of every month, do people in Portugal feel it is a lucky number versus an unlucky number? Surprisingly, he stated people still view 13 as unlucky, especially Friday the 13th, which led me to wonder if the pilgrims planning their visit to Fatima avoid that day. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skepticon Studios in Calgary, Canada.
Hi, I'm Leslie Rosenblood, host of Podcast for Inquiry, the official podcast of the Centre for Inquiry Canada. Every 2 weeks, I bring you a conversation with an expert on some complex subject, which we discuss with intelligence and nuance. The goal is that you come away with more than just a surface-level understanding, as well as an appreciation for a genuine spirit of inquiry. If your intellectual curiosity extends to science, religion, philosophy, economics, humanism, politics, and more, subscribe to Podcast for Inquiry today, available anywhere you get your podcasts. A video form is also available on YouTube on the Centre for Inquiry Canada's channel. I look forward to welcoming you to the inquiring community.
With all the weird, wacky woo that's worth watching, it's Woo Watch with Kate Thomas.
Hi folks, Kate here. I'm a pharmacist and a skeptic, and I spend a lot of time debunking dodgy health claims. I can't wait to tell you what's happening this week in the world of woo. This week's Woo of the Week goes to Donald Trump for declaring that paracetamol, or acetaminophen as it's called in the US, causes autism. Let's hear him try to explain it himself.
I said, well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay?
Yep, that's our starting point. He can't even pronounce it, but he's ready to rewrite obstetric medicine guidelines on it. And he's forgetting something. Autism was first described in the 1940s. Paracetamol wasn't in common use until the 1950s. So unless Tylenol built a time machine, that timeline doesn't work. This isn't based on brand new science. What actually happened is that the Wall Street Journal reported the US Health Department might be preparing a review linking prenatal Tylenol to autism. Trump and RFK Jr. jumped on it, a skeptical person might say, to stir distrust in medicine, or maybe even to distract from other political issues.
Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol. During pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism.
A stronger and more recent Swedish study compared siblings, which controls for shared genetics and family environment. They found no increased risk of autism, ADHD, or intellectual disability when one pregnancy used Panadol and another didn't. So why do these claims spread? Because they're simple and scary. Common medicine causes autism makes for a viral headline. The truth, that autism is a complex neurodevelopmental condition influenced by multiple genetic and environmental factors, the cause of which isn't at all well understood, isn't nearly as click-friendly. Don't be throwing your paracetamol out with the bathwater just yet. As always, take your medical advice from a trusted medical professional, because getting it from a politician is
not good.
This has been Kate Thomas. You can check out my other content on TikTok or Instagram at Prescribe or Pass.
There are many psychics and channelers who claim they are in contact with the Galactic Federation. But we have uncovered the truth. The Adventures of Psychic Penny and the Galactic Federation, Series 1. A daring cosmic space adventure starring Richard Saunders, Kat McLeod, Lara Benham, Maynard, Kathy Reitmeyer, and Adrienne Hill as Psychic Penny. Search for The Adventures of Psychic Penny.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill, back in Skepticon Studios in Calgary, Canada. And I'm going to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics newsletter. This is newsletter number 231. Now don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links every other week, right into your inbox. But let's see what our news editor Dee has for us this time. Hi all, says Dee. Our annual skeptical convention nears. Tickets for Skepticon 2025 are on sale now. Held in Melbourne this year on the weekend of October 4th through 5th, with online streaming access also available. We look forward to seeing our favorite speakers and attendees. The winner of the Bent Spoon and other merit awards will be announced at the dinner, so book now for that gala event. RFK Jr. is in the news again this fortnight, stacking the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee and also catching the ire of some of his peers over his actions. As well as the U.S. administration giving an announcement of a scapegoat to point at for autism diagnoses. Climate skepticism, vaccine skepticism, and all kinds of political, medical, and spiritual delusion seems to be continually on the upward trend. In the meantime, read on, Dee. Okay, Dee, I'll do just that. Position: Skeptics Online Content Manager. Australian Skeptics is expanding our online presence via a global content-rich website. We are looking for a person to be our content/editorial manager. All content will take a skeptical, i.e. critical thinking, approach to claims of pseudoscience, the paranormal, and the implications of this approach more broadly. We foresee the position as part-time and would expect the manager to have some understanding of the areas covered by Australian skeptics. The position entails establishing a list of content providers, short and long articles, processing submissions, possibly generating original copy, and liaising with website manager and developers for posting on an international site. Please contact nsw at skeptics.com.au for expressions of interest. Tickets still available for Skepticon 2025. The 41st Australian Skeptics Annual National Convention, the 12th Skeptics Convention to be held in Melbourne, will be held at the Forum Theatre, University of Melbourne, over the weekend of October 4th through 5th. The venue is just a few steps from the new Parkville Underground train station. And there will also be a Friday meet and greet on the evening of October 3rd and a gala dinner on the evening of Saturday, October 4th. The speakers list is steadily growing, with the current lineup including science education and communicators Melanie Tresick-King and Professor Dave Explains, Farina. Both will be appearing virtually from the US. Tickets for the convention and/or the dinner are available on the Skepticon website. Note that there is a streaming option for those unable to attend the convention in person. Trump ties Tylenol to autism risk. With an earlier ominous announcement of, quote, big news for autism, end quote, the U.S. administration is pointing the finger at Tylenol, known elsewhere as Paracetamol. Specifically, its use by pregnant women for a supposed link to autism. A finding stemming from a single disreputable study. How they tie a recent rise in autistic diagnosis to paracetamol since its inception in the 19th century is something we will be paying keen attention to. No doubt, he who shall not be named Junior has been pushing this. And I get so frustrated when I keep hearing that there's a rise in autism when they don't take into account that we're just better at diagnosing things. I often get the same question about Tourette syndrome, ADHD, and OCD, and I have the same answer. We just recognize it better now. RFK Jr. stacks the CDC Advisory Committee. RFK Jr. adds 7 more members to the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. The committee has been made up of predominantly anti-vax proponents, many of whom have pointed out their lack of impartiality, and very few of these members have any background in vaccine science. And also, America is now the global outlier for vaccine anti-dissemination. Driving down the immunization rate of its citizens makes the United States the only country on Earth that seems to seek out this outcome. Doctors and medical professionals across the country disagree with their own administration's actions. Its effects of sowing dissent over vaccines has already had a profound effect on the average person, parent, and punter. Meanwhile, U.S. vaccine skepticism is at a height never before seen. Despite the only facts put forward against vaccines are feelings-based anecdotes and a 22-year-old medical journal falsely correlating vaccines with autism, 9% of new parents are opting out of immunizing their children in the U.S. And this is a dangerous trend that could potentially return the epidemics of fatal illnesses from over a century ago. Officials are wavering on drinking water fluoridation. Please kick us if you've heard enough about RFK Jr. and health department news in the U.S. But sadly, they're setting a trend which is sure to be picked up in other developed nations as a form of government mass hysteria. Doubts are being spread over water fluoridation, including the malicious idea of calcium deposition inside the body and sapping IQ points. Psychic mediums put to the test. Again. We feel like every time the wheel of skeptical discourse lands on psychics, a study comes out or a double-blind test is performed. And regardless of the outcome, rarely in the affirmative for their existence, the believers of psychic and spiritual powers rarely have their minds changed. This time on the ability of psychics to pick a cause of death from a photo. And surprisingly, they couldn't do it. Return of the TikTok pharmacist. Following on the mentioned last issue of Kate Thomas's excellent collection of videos on wellness claims, there is an interesting interview with her in the last episode of the Skeptic Zone. She has another set of videos that take apart the dangerous claims of self-styled naturopath Barbara O'Neill, a nominee for this year's Ben Spoon Award. Our spies at the Skeptic Zone also tell us that Kate may well have a regular segment on the show called Woo Watch. Looking forward to it. Another Kate. We'll have Kate, Ellie, and Kate. Skeptical sales. In case your wallet is really weighing you down, you can order premium dowsing rods online. And they're not only for water divining either. Witching, ghost hunting, spiritual guidance. Finding lost items. Ooh, maybe I should get some. Personal exploration? At least they're reasonably priced. Of course, you can always make your own with a couple of coat hangers and some pipes. And that would be even cheaper. Travel tips. How much to stay at a haunted hotel during the Super Bowl? Now, there's a question I've always wanted to know the answer to, and it is apparently the question everyone is asking. While a normal night at this New Orleans haunted hotel would set you back a few $100, staying during the Super Bowl weekend inflates that number to $3,000, over 10 times inflated. Demand must be high in the ghost community to catch the game. Silliest story of the week. Man spends 35 years searching for the Loch Ness Monster. Steve Feltham is a man who has spent much of his life searching for the mythical Nessie. He has been living out of a van on the side of the famous Scottish lake. And surely by now he'd have a colorful collection of uniquely shaped driftwood. Nonetheless, this is a heartwarming story of following your dreams, even if they go nowhere. Story of the week. Doctor's Man of Steel miracle theory on political assassination. We hesitate to mention anything to do with the recent political assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, but his surgeon was recently quoted with some really interesting observations. Quote, Kirk's bone was so healthy and the density was so impressive that he's like the Man of Steel. It should have just gone through. It likely would have killed those standing behind him too, end quote, alluding to some kind of miracle and aggrandizement of the event, which is shameful. Well, that's all for this week's newsletter. The last newsletter was read on board a river cruise boat that we weren't allowed to get off for a time since it had run into a submerged 20-foot pipe, which lodged itself in one of the propellers in the middle of the river on the first day. We had to sit at an emergency dock for 2 days, instead of sailing while the river cruise staff worked their magic, finding us buses that could take us to our usual shore excursions downriver, which involved the cruise director having to find a place for 100 people to eat lunch in under 24 hours. She contacted a lovely and energetic 72-year-old Countess Maria, who was able to pull together a fabulous feast for us at her beautiful home/winery/hotel in the Douro Valley. She was a wonderful hostess and storyteller, and also had some advice for us regarding our stranded boat. She told us that the ghost of her mother was on the property, and that she had spoken to her about our predicament, and all we needed to do was have positive thoughts and our boat would be repaired that night. Lots of people in the audience were nodding, and wouldn't you know it, by the time we got back to the boat, it was ready to set sail. I guess the positive thoughts worked. It certainly couldn't have been the hard work of the emergency diving team that was able to cut out the pipe and repair the propeller. Well, I'm still extremely grateful for the experience of dining with the Viscount, listening to her stories, and for her and her staff's extraordinary efforts to feed 100 people wonderful food at the last minute. It was quite the experience. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada.
G'day, Dr. Carl here, popping up on your beloved Richard Saunders podcast, inviting you to follow me on TikTok where things are much faster. And it all has to happen in a minute or less. So, why do diet drinks get you drunker? For example, a rum and diet cola versus a rum and regular cola. Why do we hear the ocean in a seashell? Is coffee good or bad for you? With regard to farts, what happens when you hold them in, and why do farts smell worse in the shower? And the old wooden spoon, as used in cooking, does have a very porous surface, so in terms of bacteria, is it safe to use? And of course, we all know that destiny shapes our ends, but so do the natural electrical fields that we generate, and marijuana munchies might be related to a 500-million-year-old mutation that makes eating enjoyable via our natural cannabinoids that our body makes. Just follow me on TikTok at Dr. Carl, DRKARL, to find out the answer to all these questions and more.
Now it's time once again to go back to the archives, those digital archives from around the world where we can look up all sorts of interesting things from the past for skeptics. Oh yes, and these are mostly newspapers or sometimes magazines and other publications. And this week I thought we'd look up the classic term supernatural, but also include the word skeptic. Now, according to Wikipedia, supernatural phenomena or entities are those beyond the laws of nature. The term is derived from medieval Latin. Supernaturalis from Latin super, above, beyond, outside of, plus nature. The supernatural is featured in folklore and religious contexts, but it can also feature as an explanation in more secular contexts, as in the cases of superstitions or belief in the paranormal. The term is attributed to non-physical entities such as angels, demons, gods, and spirits. It also includes claimed abilities embodied in or provided by such beings, including magic, telekinesis, levitation, precognition, and extrasensory perception. And down the bottom, it's quite a lengthy page down the bottom, skepticism, American English, or skepticism with a C. British English is generally any questioning attitude or doubt towards one or more items of punitive knowledge or belief. It is often directed at domains such as the supernatural, morality, moral skepticism, religion, skepticism about the existence of God, or knowledge, skepticism about the possibility of knowledge or certainty. But then that links to the main wiki entry on skepticism. But anyway, using those two terms, let's dive into those digital archives. And here's a fun one. This is from the Nevada Daily Mail, dated the 10th of June 2007, and it's TV listings. Yeah! And on that day, on TCM at 11:30 p.m., presumably, we had the following movie: Voodoo Island, 1957. Boris Karloff, Beverly Tyler. A professional supernatural skeptic comes to a tiny Pacific island to dispel rumours of a voodoo curse, but instead discovers carnivorous plants and creepy tribes. Sounds like a real winner. And not surprisingly, although we have covered these in other troves, in other segments, especially for James Randi, there are many references to James Randi. For example, the Spokesman Review, 28th of June 2007, there's a story, Faith and Values, Skeptic Firm in Unbelief. Man challenges claims regarding supernatural. And a picture of James Randi. But we won't go into that today because I think we've covered this in other segments. But here's something from 1996, the Daily Gazette, on the 2nd of April. And the Daily Gazette is the subtitle here, let's see, the independent voice of the capital region, although it's from New York. And under the broad heading of Tain't So, Skeptic Amongst the Paranormal with lecture at Guilderland Library by Patrick Krupp, Gazette reporter. With something akin to sheepishness, Joe Nickell. The late Joe Nickell, what a wonderful skeptical investigator he was. Professional skeptic admitted he's a, quote, frustrated believer, end quote. Nickell is the guy who debunked the Shroud of Turin, the reputed image of Jesus left on a burial cloth, as if to prove that his dedication to doubt is non-denominational. He spent the last fall discrediting claims of milk-dripping statues in Hindu temples. His skepticism is omnivorous. Haunted houses, crystals, creationism, psychic, spontaneous human combustion, UFOs, stigmata, you name it. Nickell has doubted it and published 13 books in 13 years to prove it. Quote, don't get me wrong, I've written poetry in my day. I have loved and lost with the best of the romantics. It's just that I reject silliness. I'd love it if haunted houses were true, but the evidence isn't there, end quote. Said Nickell, a senior research fellow with the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. Headquartered in Amherst near Buffalo, Psychop investigates claims of pseudoscience and the supernatural and publishes a bi-monthly journal, Skeptical Inquirer. Nickell will give a free lecture and a slideshow on investigating paranormal claims at 7 p.m. Wednesday at the Guilderland Public Library. His appearance is sponsored by the Inquiring Skeptics of Upper New York. Nickell describes himself as, quote, a sympathetic non-believer, end quote, and is convinced that Homo sapiens have a primal urge to find or impose meaning in a world that resists human efforts to understand it. Quote, most claims of the paranormal make grand promises to people. It's natural that people would want to believe those things. Ghosts are an indication of survival after death. Psychic power would give us an edge on the future. Crystals would give us healing power we don't have. So let me apologize that these things don't exist. I'm sorry. I'm as sorry as you are, end quote, he said. And oddly enough, the story continues on the same page as the horoscopes. Nicholl will highlight some of the famous cases he has investigated over the years. The so-called Mackenzie House, haunting in Toronto, last year's alleged alien autopsy, and the crop circle craze that started in England several years ago. Quote, there does seem to be a lot of stuff out there that's just too silly for words, but I am not sure things are worse today than they were in the past. It's hard to pick a period when there wasn't some paranormal belief running wild, end quote, he said. Nicholl, 51, was born in Lexington, Kentucky, and earned a bachelor's, master's and doctoral degrees from that city's University of Kentucky, all in English literature. As a child, he learnt magic from his father and for 3 years worked as a professional magician. He has also worked as a private investigator for a detective agency, as a blackjack dealer, and as a teacher of technical writing at the University of Kentucky. His two most recent books are Entities, Spirits, Demons and Other Alien Beings, and Detecting Forgeries. Now he works full-time as an investigator for Psychop. Nicholl, for instance, has investigated some 30 reports of spontaneous human combustion and found the evidence in each case unconvincing, sometimes comically so. Quote, this is not a topic, obviously, where you want to go around making jokes. I tried to avoid that, but when the person involved has her head in a fireplace and people still think the fire is spontaneous, it's not always possible to avoid humorous aspects. From a skeptic's point of view, this is good fun, end quote, Nicholl said. Another result that's come through from the year 2000 on the 22nd of May from the Beaver Country Times. First season of X-Files episodes now available in DVD gift pack. There we go. When the X-Files premiered in the fall of 1993, it didn't take viewers long to realise they were seeing something different. And it goes on with a review, a positive quite review. This 3-volume set contains 6 episodes from the 4th season. It's $39.98. The X-Files has become not only a cult favourite, but also been a top 20 show throughout much of its run, etc., etc. Okay, that's great. I don't mind the odd episode of the X-Files. And what do we have here from the Telegraph, dated the 15th of July, 1989? And this particular newspaper comes from Nashua, New Hampshire. Skeptic debunks meteorite fires, ghosts and spooky lights. And this is by a service called the Scripps Howard News Service. Knoxville, Tennessee. David Hackett is a scientific ghostbuster. He has studied ghosts and unidentified flying objects, sonic booms, and the chunk of green ice that fell from the sky in 1978. He has yet to find anything that could not be explained scientifically. Quote, I have not seen anything I would call a mystery, end quote, said Hackett, an engineer in private practice with an interest in science. Quote, but I'm not willing to make the jump from skeptic to cynic and say there is nothing supernatural that exists. Science is not at the point where it can explain anything and everything. Sometimes we explain one mystery with another. We say a UFO is swamp gas or ball lightning, but we don't know what it is. End quote. And just as an aside, I think I'm correct in saying that ball lightning is a myth. Anyway, we read on. Hackett is a member of Orion Research Forum and Network, an outgrowth of the former Oak Ridge, Tennessee isochronous Isochronous. Now, that's a new word for me. Let me look this up here. Isochronous. It means something that occurs with constant, uniform, or equal timing. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, but that's interesting. Observation network, or ORFAM. ORFAM was charted because Hackett said many group members were unhappy with the UFO hobbyist image of Orion. The original group included many scientists and engineers from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Hackett said, quote, "Whatever UFOs might be, they are worthy of scientific study. To refuse to look at something is not scientific," end quote. ORFAM has more than 100 members and includes a branch called Anomaly Investigations, which investigates UFOs, poltergeists, and close encounters. One of the unexplainables that Hackett explained was the Brown Mountain lights, ghostly illuminations that appear on Brown Mountain in western North Carolina. Some have said that Brown Mountain is a UFO landing strip. Quote, "There are probably 100 of these ghost lights about the country," end quote, Hackett said. Quote, "The Brown Mountain lights are one of the most famous," end quote. The original lights, Hackett said, were probably ball lightning, the kind of lightning people sometimes see rolling around their bathtubs. Good grief. The myth of ghostly lights continues, however, because people often see stars or city lights beyond the mountain, which appear to be on the mountain. Quote, "Any mystery light you see there automatically becomes a Brown Mountain light," end quote. Hackett also has investigated the Bristol booms, which shook houses in a subdivision in Bristol, Tennessee, rattling glasses in the cabinets. Hackett said the booms turned out to be sonic booms that were intensified because they bounced off a nearby ridge. Quote, "Some people believed a cavern system was collapsing under them," end quote, Hackett said. Although the Air Force Reserve did not confirm its pilots flew over the area, Hackett suggested a change of flight patterns and within 2 weeks of the Bristol boom had ceased. The group has looked into several hundred reports of UFOs in the past 12 years, Hackett said, and most of them turned out to be Venus low on the horizon. Quote, "It does rather spectacular twinkling," end quote, he said, explaining that the difference between the perception of the viewer's eyes gives the false impression of motion. The group has investigated 3 reports of close encounters with alien beings, but Hackett said all 3 were of low credibility. Quote, "That doesn't say there aren't close encounters out there more credible than these," end quote, he said. He also researched the meteorite that fell in Anderson County in 1978, striking a ridge and starting a fire. The flames, it turned out, were from a hunter's camp site. Viewers, Hackett said, didn't notice the fire until after they saw the meteor falling in the distance, and then assumed the two were relate. Or I guess that should have read related. He also helped investigate the 25-pound chunk of green ice that fell in April 1978 in Ripley, Tennessee. After civil defense determined the ice was not radioactive, some area residents tasted it. But the ice remained unidentified until the ORFAM group studied samples and found they contained strains of syphilis and gonorrhea. Oh dear. Quote, oh dear. Quote, "A military jet had a leaking commode," end quote, Hackett said. Quote, "It had frozen on the outside of the plane and fallen off. What made it green was the copper sulfate disinfectant they used," end quote. What a bizarre story. Investigators in the group try to leave concerned callers with a bit of uncertainty. Quote, "While we're skeptical, we don't make pronouncements," end quote, Hackett said. Quote, "That's the way real life is. Nothing is certain. You're always left wondering whether you've misperceived or whether there's something there," end quote. And the moral of that story is, don't taste green ice that falls from the sky. And let's wrap up from a letter to the editor. dated the 23rd of July 2007 from the Victoria Advocate. And I think this comes to us from Texas. Yes, it does indeed, having a check, come from Texas. Ghosts do exist, for some. To the editor, the Advocate. I was lifted up by the article in the Faith section, July 14, about the great accomplishments of the magician who became the country's skeptic-in-chief. Must be Randy, I guess. By using natural ways, he exposed frauds among psychics, mediums, and clairvoyants who claimed to be above nature by using supernatural powers. Then the article let me down. It strayed into the ignorant side of this knowledgeable skeptic. It quoted him as saying he didn't think that we live beyond the grave at all, and he didn't see any compelling evidence to support that belief. One would think that this great achiever would have experienced ghosts, even if he only worked on the edge of the paranormal. He must have overlooked the compelling evidence right before his eyes that we can exist beyond the grave. Ghosts are the supernatural spirits of dead persons beyond the grave. Ghosts are proof that spiritual life exists after death, at least for persons who become ghosts. We may dislike experiencing ghosts and not want to become one, the haunting pranksters that are drifting in limbo. But if we don't mend our ways and prepare our salvation for after death, we could become ghosts. It's an entirely separate subject of discussion, though. The point is that this great skeptic showed his ignorance by overlooking ghosts as proof of spiritual life after this natural life. And it's signed Edward L. Flickinger, Victoria. And let's assume, or let's verify, I should say, that the original article was about James Randi. And it says, I was lifted up by the article in the Faith section, July 14. So, and this is from the 23rd of July, so let me see if it's possible to have a look at that section or that particular story. And wouldn't you know it, that particular issue of this paper is not archived here. I think we can assume the story is about James Randi. Well, there we are, just some of the references to both the word supernatural and the word skeptic. And as I said, when I peruse the pages that come up, a lot of them have to do with James Randi. I guess it's the magic combination of those two words. Magician devotes life to skeptically exposing fraud, reads one newspaper here. Or something here from 1990, skeptics organized, but New Agers and dowsers relaxed. Oh, that's got to be worth a look. And I might save this one for next time. Tuscaloosa News, 1st of April, by Joe Earl. Atlanta. Keith Parsons jokes about psychics. Quote, what did two psychics say to one another in the morning? Hi, you're fine, how am I? End quote. But the president of the Georgia Skeptics doesn't think they're really all that funny. Yes, why don't we save that until next week? We can look more into the supernatural and the skeptics. But it just goes to show, when you visit Google Newspapers or Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, type in your search. Well, as we like to say, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you to those people who support the Skeptic Zone via PayPal at Patreon at skepticzone.tv, and thank you to extra supporters out there who are very generous with their support. Need I say more? And a big shout out to my friends who are teachers. Right now, having a very well-earned break. Coming up on next week's show, part 2 of our look at superstitions and the word skeptic in the TROVE Archives. Also, well, I don't know. That's the mystery of the Skeptic Zone. We never know what's coming up. I'll see if I can do a report from Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. Of course, by the time the next episode comes out, it will be halfway through the National Convention in Melbourne. Again, if you can make it, get your tickets at skepticon.org.au. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to those people who listen after the music for the dice game, which we have every now and then. And this is where you use your psychic mystical insights, or you consult Psychic Penny, or maybe the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet whispers in your ear. Anyway, you try to guess the numbers. I'm going to be rolling a D20. 20-sided die here. And I'm going to roll it 3 or 4 times. Let's go. I won't guess ahead this time. I'll just... Now, why not? Why not? I can't help myself. I'll guess 6 for the first roll. Here it comes. 8 is the first number through. Let's roll it again. I didn't guess, did I? Never mind. 16. I would have guessed 16, of course. You know that. 16 is the number. Okay, next guess from me would be 7. Why not? 7, here it comes. 9. Oh, well. Last one, the supplementary. Here we go. What is your guess, I wonder? I didn't guess again. I better guess. I won't tell you what it is. All right, it was 11. I'm going to roll one more because I forgot to guess. I'm going to guess 5. Here we go. 17. Oh dear. All right. Today's winning numbers, there are lots of them. 8, 16, 9, 11 and 17. Good heavens, that's the combination to my briefcase.